Today, we're diving into two critical concepts in medical billing, and that is incident to and split shared services. If you've ever struggled with these, don't worry, you're not alone. There are tons and tons of organizations that are still probably not getting this right. They can be very confusing, but mastering them is really essential for billing accurately and for being in compliance. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Victoria. I'm a medical coder, auditor, educator, and content creator. And on my channel, I provide tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you be successful in a medical coding career. If you haven't already, highly encourage you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get alerts when I post new episodes. So let's get into incident two and split shared services. Starting with incident two. Incident two and split shared, both you have to understand primarily this is a Medicare rule, CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Medicare. There may be other insurances that follow this sort of billing method, or they might have a similar policy. So some insurances might say we follow incident two guidelines, or we follow a similar incident two-ish kind of policy. But when we say incident two, we're really talking about Medicare. So if we're talking about billing with advanced practitioners and physicians, but we're not talking about Medicare, that we shouldn't be referring to that as incident two, because that's when it gets very, very confusing. I personally just try to say, like, if we're talking about like a Highmark or a Capital or an Aetna or a UHC, in those cases, I would just say advanced practitioner billing. But some people will say incident to, but they mean it more broadly. So make sure that we're using the correct terminology. So incident to services are services that are performed by non-physician practitioners. Now, I don't like the term non-physician practitioner. I once was doing education on a nun and was given papers from my institution to provide to them in regards to this type of billing. And she pointed to that and she goes, "Tell me, what is an NPP?" And I had to look a nun in the face and tell her that she was referred to as a non-physician, a not physician. So I totally respect that that terminology is not the best. I personally prefer advanced practitioner. I know some people feel good or bad or other ways too about mid-level providers. What we're talking about are things like nurse practitioners, physicians assistants, and non-MDs, DOs, etc. When we're talking about incident two, they're the services that are provided by someone that's a non-physician practitioner, like a nurse practitioner or physician assistant, but they're billed as though the physician did them. So under that supervising physician's NPI number. So it looks like the physician did the work, even though it was actually done by a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner, or even like a nurse midwife. And we can do that, but we have to meet certain criteria. First, that supervising physician has to initiate that patient's plan of care. That means the physician needs to see the patient for that initial visit before we can start billing incident two. So, for example, patient comes in and they see the physician and they say, "You know what, you've got diabetes. I'm going to set up your care plan. Here's what we need you to do. Here's some medications you're going to take. Here's your treatment plan. But next visit, you're going to see Rachel, and Rachel is our nurse practitioner. She's actually great with our diabetic patients." If we meet all of that criteria for incident two billing, when Rachel, the physician assistant or CRNP, is seeing that patient, we can bill it under the physician and still get a higher reimbursement rate. And we'll talk about the reimbursement rate, because that's the big reason that people want to do this. If we bill under, for example, a nurse practitioner to Medicare, they only pay us 85% of their fee. So if they were going to normally reimburse us $100 for that physician service, for a nurse practitioner, they only pay us 85. So people want to bill this incident to when they can, so they can get the full fee. Sometimes people feel that it's not worth the risk, because if they bill it wrong, they're going to wind up with all kinds of penalties. So this is an organization to organization decision on how you kind of want to implement incident to, and then also split shared services within your organization. Has to be initiated by the physician. They have to have that care plan. Second, for that follow-up visits, direct supervision is required. Now, that doesn't mean the physician has to be physically in that exam room, but they do need to be in the same office suite and immediately available to assist if needed. So, if they are on vacation in Aruba, it can't be billed incident two. And I've had that happen. I've had instances where I was auditing services and called up or emailed the practice manager and went, "Hey, was Dr. H in the office this week? Because I don't see that they were on the schedule." And they're like, "Well, what are you talking about? Like, why are you asking?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm just doing this audit and I need to verify some of the services." And they're like, "Oh yeah, they were on vacation that whole week. And here they had been billed under his services had been billed under him while he was gone because they were performed by the nurse practitioner and he wasn't there." We also have to have continuity of care. So for the service to qualify as incident two, it has to be part of an ongoing plan of care that the physician originally set and that the follow-up visits have that same kind of quality and that the physician stays a little bit involved. They don't specifically say it has to be X amount of visits a year, but they have to show that the physician was still involved in the care, and it has to be for that original problem. If the patient comes in with a new problem, that can't be billed incident two. So let's say, again, going back to our diabetic patient, they're going in to see Rachel, the advanced practitioner. And oh my gosh, Rachel, I'm not feeling so well. My stomach hurts, my knee hurts, everything hurts, my back hurts. I've got all these new problems. Guess what? That visit can't be billed as anymore. Incident two, because now we've got new problems. It has to be just that original problem that that physician set that care plan for. You can see now why people are getting very, very confused because this isn't something that you can just look at in a grid and go, okay, this physician was in the office today. We're going to bill under them. There's other factors in there. And that's where a lot of organizations get into problems because they think they can just follow this grid and it doesn't quite work that way with incident two. Maybe with some other insurances out there, sure, they might just say, yeah, we don't care. Just bill it under the nurse practitioner or bill it under the physician, and we're going to reimburse whatever. When we're talking about strict incident two, there's more involved. So incident two services, these are for non-facility settings, such as a physician office or a clinic. It cannot be billed in facility settings like hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, or other institutional settings. And this restriction is because the office setting really does allow for that direct supervision requirement to be met. So here's a quick example. Say a patient sees Dr. Smith for their back pain, and Dr. Smith sets up that treatment plan. Patient later returns for a follow-up. Guess who they're seeing? They're not seeing Dr. Smith. They're seeing the nurse practitioner. And that follow-up visit can be billed as incident two because it's a routine visit following up on that back pain that we've already seen that physician, we've got that care plan. But let's say that patient comes in, now they bring up a new issue. Now they've got shoulder pain. Then Dr. Smith has to see them for that new complaint before it would qualify for incident two again. So that's why, again, it can't just be billed based off of a grid, based off of who's in the office. I mean, that's a component of it. We need a supervising physician to be in the office that day, but that's not the entirety of it. A new issue can totally change this. Now, going on to our split shared services. In split shared service, both the physician and that NPP, non-physician practitioner, advanced practitioner, mid-level provider, whatever your preferred term is, they see that patient same day and they each perform portions of that E&M service. So the service can be billed under either the physician or the NPP's NPI, but there are specific requirements for choosing which provider it should go under. First and foremost, both the physician and the non-physician practitioner must see the patient on the same day. They can't split the service over multiple days and bill it as split shared. It has to be same day, same patient. Next, each provider has to perform a medically necessary portion of the E&M service. This means both the physician and the advanced practitioner are contributing something unique and something essential to the patient's care during that visit. It's not just a quick check-in by the provider. It's shared and documented by both of them. So here's the important part, deciding which provider's NPI to bill under. So when we're talking about a shared service, if the physician performed the substantial portion of the service, meaning they did the majority of the critical parts of the E&M service, we would bill it under the physician's NPI. If not, it goes under the advanced practitioner's NPI. So the provider who did the most significant part of the work will determine the billing. So if it's time-based billing, that makes it kind of easy, right? Because we can go, Okay, well, here's the amount of time this provider spent, and here's the amount of time this provider spent, who spent more than half of that total time. Documentation is really key here. So the medical record needs to clearly indicate which parts of the service each provider performed, and that's critical for compliance and it helps ensure that you're billing correctly. We used to have this a little bit differently. It used to be that MD or DO or whoever could come in and do like a portion of it. Like any kind of portion. One of the key components we used to say, so history and exam medical decision making, when we used to code them based off of that. So I would have providers who would come in and they do like a heart and lung exam and bill it under them. But there's definitely been some changes to split shared services as we evolved evaluation and management. So if we look at a scenario like this, patient comes in, physician performs the initial exam and the assessment, and then the NPP comes in the same day, provides additional assessment and counseling. If the physician's portion is deemed the substantial portion of that service, we bill it under the physician's NPI. So when we kind of look here at the breakdown of incident to versus split shared, we can categorize them in different ways. So like the location, the supervision requirements, who sees the patient, who are we billing under, and then the reimbursement rate, right? So when we look kind of at the breakdown of what is incident to, what is split shared, one of the big things we want to think about is the location. So the incident to services, or when we're talking about office clinic services, split shared is in that facility. It's hospital inpatient, it's hospital outpatient. Supervision is another requirement for incident to that has to meet that direct supervision. In split shared, we don't have that direct supervision required. We could have one provider coming into seeing the patient in the hospital, and then later in the day, the other provider comes in, but it has to be on the same day. So typically, when we're billing incident to services, who's seeing the patient is the NPP. The physician has to be on site and providing that direct supervision, but they are actually not the ones seeing that patient that day. In split shared, they're both seeing that patient on the same day. So as far as billing NPI, when we meet the requirements for incident to, we bill it under the physician's NPI because that's when we get that 100% fee versus the 85% fee. And with split shared, we could bill under whatever the provider did, the substantial portion, either whether it be the physician or the advanced practitioner. And then as far as the reimbursement, when we are billing under physicians, under their NPI, we get 100%. If we have to bill it under the advanced practitioner, we are getting 85%. So that is incident to and split shared in a nutshell. There's a lot more that can go into it, things like contracted employees, but I just wanted to give a good kind of general overview of these services. I fully appreciate that not everyone wants to sit for a 1 or 2 hour webinar or has the time to sit for a 1 to 2 hour webinar to get all of the nitty gritty details. Some people just want the overview. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it hit all of the marks. If you have questions about incident to or split share, definitely leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, just keep on coding on.